Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Health is Wealth. Today we will be discussing hay fever and migraine. Migraine is the most common neurological condition in the developed world. It's more prevalent than diabetes, asthma and epilepsy combined. In the UK, 8 million people are affected by migraine. Hay fever, otherwise known as allergic rhinitis, affects 1 in 4 people in the UK. The most common cause of hay fever is grass pollen. Now, with the grass pollen counts being so high this summer, we will be discussing how best to cope with hay fever and also especially during fasting. With me today, I have Mohammed Somroo, who is a community pharmacist and has vast experience in counselling patients on both migraine and hay fever. Welcome to the show, Mohammed.
Thank you.
So, Mohammed, can you tell me what is hay fever and who are the most likely sufferers?
Hay fever is an allergic reaction to pollen, and it can occur in any age group, and it leads to symptoms such as sneezing, runny nose and watery eyes.
Oh, okay. And who are most likely to suffer with hay fever?
Any age group, so I've seen children, babies from 1 year plus, and through to the elderly.
Really? I mean, I can talk from personal experience. I mean, I've never suffered with hay fever in my life, but this year in particular, I know the pollen counts are so high, I actually developed a bit of hay fever, my runny eyes, my throat felt really sort of blocked up. So what current treatments are available for hay fever sufferers? Yeah,
there's many treatments that can be bought over the counter, and I classify these in 4 types. Firstly, we look at the oral medications, so the oral tablets, for example, the once daily preparations such as cetirizine and loratadine, and then the oral solutions that can be used in the children. And then you've got the 3 to 4 times daily preparations such as Piriton, but unfortunately can cause drowsiness as one of the side effects. The next class of medicines are used for the watery eyes, as I mentioned, and they can help with reducing the watering of the eyes, which is one of the side effects, the symptoms of a hay fever. And the third category is nasal decongestions, and this can help, as it suggests, with the congestion in the nose. And finally, the last type of treatment that can be bought over the counter is nasal sprays, which are steroid sprays that can reduce the inflammation associated with hay fever.
So there's a wide variety of hay fever preparations that can be actually bought from the pharmacy. So the advice really is go and see your pharmacist.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've mentioned, nasal sprays and eye drops. Can we use these during Ramadan?
The general consensus is that you can use nasal drops. However, you can't use nasal sprays during fast. However, I advise any patient to speak to a scholar that they trust. In any case, if nasal sprays cannot be used during the fast, I would advise patients to use it during Sahri and Iftar.
Right.
Because it's usually a twice daily preparation.
Okay, so would it actually last then? Because obviously our fasts are so long this year. If we were to take it at Suhoor and then at Iftar, would it still sort of be effective?
That's a very good question, because it's usually the action is not for that long. However, there is no real alternative other than taking it in that period. So I would advise patients to get around that fact if they still wanted to fast and they believe that it could be controlled with the nasal spray, to follow that advice.
Okay, so if we can't take our nasal sprays or nasal drops, and just say, for example, I have taken my medication at Suhoor and at Iftar, and I'm still experiencing symptoms during the day, do you have any non-drug advice? Yeah,
definitely. Things that don't cost any money, and they're really simple things that anyone can do, really, such as keeping your windows closed, not all day, which is a myth. People think that you need to close it during the night, but that's not quite correct. It's important to keep your windows closed during peak times, which is 8 to 10 a.m. when the air warms up outside, and when it cools down, which is 5 to 7 p.m. Also for drivers, if they keep their window shut whilst driving, essentially that will reduce the amount of pollen coming into the car, and they can rely on their fan and their air conditioning. There's other things as well. So for example, if a patient comes home, they can actually wash their hair, because pollen can stick to your hair.
Really? I did not know that.
And what actually happens is when they go to sleep, that pollen can transfer to their pillow, hence why patients get symptoms during the night. Because actually the pollen count is not too high at nighttime. So that's a way of actually getting the symptoms during the night. So a way of avoiding that would be to wash your hair when you get home.
Do you think we should wash our pillow covers as well then?
Yeah, regular. And there is some other advice as well to use nasal balms on the inside of your nostrils, and that will reduce the amount of pollen actually getting into the nose. And there's a new drug-free, steroid-free nasal spray which can be sprayed into the nostrils, and that produces a barrier which essentially reduces the amount of pollen that actually goes up your nostrils.
Oh, okay, that's very informative advice there, Mohammed.
Thank you.
So I'm moving on to migraines, but before I do, I just wanted to talk to you about the common headache.
Yeah.
So I've heard anecdotally from a lot of patients and friends as well that they're getting a lot of headaches during fasting.
Yeah.
So have you got any advice on how we can manage the common headache whilst fasting?
Yeah, so to manage the common headaches, we'll have to look at what actually potentially causes the headaches during the long fasts, as you said. Yeah. And one of the major factors is dehydration. So I advise patients that are fasting to actually drink lots of water between iftar and sahari to really keep themselves hydrated. The common temptation is just to drink sugary drinks. And that leads on to another thing, to avoid sugary products during sahari, because what you will get initially is a rapid rise in your blood glucose, which will then be a sudden crash of your blood glucose, which will lead to hypoglycemia, which is low blood sugar levels.
Yeah.
And then that will leave you feeling slightly dehydrated and potentially lead to a headache. So those two things are having a balanced diet, staying well hydrated, trying to avoid stress,
Yes.
taking regular breaks, and yeah, just trying to do all of those, encompass all of those things during your fast, during sahari.
But just say, for example, if I've still got the headache and I've broken my fast, can I pop a pill?
Yeah. So after you fast, you can take medication, and there is actually stuff that you can apply during your fast. So like cooling pads, for example, which can be used for a headache, as well as forehead rubs as well. And this really reduces the tension within the head.
Of course. Okay, thank you for that. So I mentioned earlier, 8 million people in the UK suffer with migraine.
Yeah.
That's a shockingly high number.
Very high.
So what is migraine?
The exact cause is unknown, but it's been known to be linked to chemical changes within your brain.
Right.
And it's essentially a severe headache with associated pain at the front of your head and the side of your head.
Right, okay. And I've also heard as well, from patients, because thankfully I'm not a migraine sufferer, it's quite a stabbing kind of pain as well, and it's quite debilitating.
Yeah.
So how can pharmacists help?
Well, pharmacists are very accessible healthcare professionals with long opening hours, and you don't need an appointment. And they can really tailor the intervention and the advice that they give to the patient's needs. So they'll ask whether the patient's had particular medicine before and seek to give them medication that's suitable for them, and consider also if they're on any other medication, for example.
And are there many treatment options available in the pharmacy for migraine?
Yeah, there is. There's some tablets. One of the most common ones is Migraleaf, which is a combination of paracetamol and codeine. And then you have Migraine, which is actually a prescribed medicine as well. And it comes in a very small quantity, which can be bought over the counter. So them two medication are the most popular, but you've also got some other treatments which can be used during the fast. For example, the cooling pads and the forehead rubs and the forehead applicators, which help with the pain, and they're applied locally.
Okay, that's great. So any advice for migraine sufferers during Ramadan? I mean, there are plenty of patients out there who have been trying to fast, but they suffer with a migraine and then they have to break their fast, and they feel very, very disheartened because they wish to fast, but the migraine's preventing them. So do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's really important to have a balanced diet, especially at sahari. So as mentioned before in the headache section, is to actually keep low sugar intake at sahari, so you don't have that crash of and low blood sugar level. It's important to stay hydrated, take regular breaks if at work. For example, avoid using computers for long periods. And just to catch up on your sleep as well. Some people go through Ramadan with having very limited sleep. I think it's important to get that sleep. So whether you'd come home after work and sleep for a few hours before iftar, that may be a potential option. But it's really important having the same amount of sleep, because your body is going through that period of not having food and water, which you can have at Sehri, but obviously there's long fasts that it's important just to keep a well-balanced diet, as well as having regular sleep and trying to avoid stress as well.
Absolutely. And there are lots of trigger factors as well for migraine, aren't they?
Yeah.
So do you mind mentioning some of these so that our viewers can actually be aware of what the triggers are, so they can try and sort of steer clear from them?
Yeah, so some people have complained that actually caffeine can cause migraines. And so if, for example, you're feeling that actually you've had some coffee in the morning and that's actually causing migraine, then try to eliminate that from your Sehri. But if you feel that actually a lack of caffeine is causing the migraines, then try to incorporate that in your Sehri.
Right.
So it's really about tailoring the advice to each individual's needs, and that's where the pharmacist can come into it. And just really having a balanced diet and really stick to the foods that you know as well. A lot of times we try to eat really tasteful food.
Absolutely, especially
Ramadan.
oily. Our samosas and pakoras. We can't get away from those.
Exactly, and you might not eat that across the year, so your body might not be used to that and may react differently to it. So it's important to stick to the foods you know, and to stay very well hydrated. And I think that's the key. Also, when people are going to the mosque in the evenings and praying throughout the night, they need to stay hydrated. It's not good just having water at iftar and having a little bit at Sehri. It's important to have it throughout the night if they're staying up, or whilst they're praying as well.
Absolutely, that's great advice. Thank you very much for joining us today, Mohammed. And it's been very insightful and great advice and information.
Thank you for having me.
So there we have it. We've had great advice today on both migraine and hay fever. We hope you found all the advice beneficial today. Now it's time for our fitness segment with our personal trainer. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we're talking about kyphosis. Kyphosis, or hunchback, is when you've got a curvature of your upper spine. So you might see it in some people when they start curving it to the front. So you can see I've got a bit of an arch in my upper back. Some have a bigger one, some have a small one. And it depends entirely of how long you've left it untreated. The thing about kyphosis is that you can improve your posture and you can improve the muscles in your upper back by strengthening them into keeping your shoulders up and back. That's the exercise that I'm going to show you today. It's a very, very simple, low impact exercise that you can do anywhere. However, I do suggest you do it on a chair. You can do it on a stool-like chair or on a regular chair. That's entirely up to you. You just sit quite comfortably on the chair, put your arms down your side. Try as much as you can to keep your back in an upright position. You're allowed to have a small curvature in your lower back. In fact, I'd recommend it. You're going to take your thumbs and point them outwards in each direction, out from your body. And as you do so, you're also going to try and get them to meet behind your back. Now, unless you're really flexible, you can't actually make your thumbs meet behind your back. But the aim here is to try and imagine that your thumbs have to meet. When you do this, you're using the muscles in your upper back and you're contracting them and strengthening them in this exercise. And by doing so, you're going to ask your shoulder blades to go back and get into the right position.